No matter what kind of app you build in the modern world, you need identity. And a lot of times, if we've been a business developer, we're building identity using Active Directory on premises. And as we move to the cloud, now all of a sudden, it's a lot more difficult to get this authentication back and forth. Are people who they say they are? So we have, unsurprisingly, Azure Active Directory, an opportunity for us to get identity services from Azure. Let's take a look at a little how that works on the slide. So we're going to start off with Azure on-premises, or Active Directory on-premises. We have our Active Directory Windows Server, maybe other directories. There's Kerberos authentication. We've built our apps in here in the past. But the problem is we now have these cloud offerings, this software as a service. We've got Dropbox, we've got Office 365, we've got this public cloud and these thousands of SaaS apps out there. How do we coordinate their activities as an organization or not? And the answer is Microsoft's Azure Active Directory. Now it sits between these two and acts really as an intermediary using slightly different protocols. So we can connect our on-premises Active Directory up to Azure Active Directory. And we can replicate in quite a few different numbers of ways, which we won't go into in this course, but we can pass it, we can replicate it up and just have the hashes go up or some other things. We can have it call back to an ADFS server to authenticate. But for the most part, we've got a relatively simple replication out to Microsoft Azure Active Directory. Once we're there, we can then bind all these other services back and forth to communicate with our Active Directory. Here's the insane power of this from my perspective, is it gives us this single sign-on experience across a wide variety of apps and self-service for the people. And what that does for us is it lets customers, partners, everyone interact in this nice Azure Active Directory area that is secure but provides this single sign-on experience. Now, what does that mean to us? And if you look at what's out there, that single sign-on experience can be really difficult for most people to get a hold of. You're not used to it. You don't go to Facebook and sign in with the same authentication mechanism that you do when you do Dropbox or when you do Office 365 or when you do X or Y or Z. Instead, everyone has a different authentication, different password, different everything. Well, that can be really frustrating for people who are trying to manage usernames and logins, as well as for people the users of those apps. So to make it easy, you can use something like Azure Active Directory, and you can subscribe to Azure Active Directory and authenticate that way, and then other organizations can leverage your service. Let me bring it down and make it simple. Let's say you want to use Dropbox as an enterprise. Here's the nice thing, or VSTS, because we're going to be demonstrating Visual Studio Team Services. Let's use that. VSTS, you can go and say, I want to use VSTS, use my Azure Active Directory. The beautiful thing is I use the same password to log into VSTS as I do for my own network. More importantly, however, is that the people in charge of running the security for that network can take my identity, if I leave the organization, remove it from Active Directory, it removes it from Azure Active Directory, and I no longer have access to VSTS. There are thousands of applications out there and of products out there that work with Azure Active Directory. The ability for you as an enterprise to put all of those under one umbrella is extraordinarily compelling. You can even use Google Apps under Azure Active Directory as an authentication mechanism. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So Steve, there's one thing I wanted to ask you. So let's say that I have got an application and I've got an Azure Active Directory and it's got some users in there from my organization. Let's say I want to open up some APIs to people who are not in my organization. I don't want to have to manage their identities within my directory, but I still want them to authenticate against whatever services I'm exposing. Does Azure Active Directory help me in that case?
Yes and no. And I'm going to let you talk on one of these places I think you're going, but there's a really interesting capability of Active Directory to be able to join. So let's say you belong to another organization. We can federate and we can work together, and I can trust your Active Directory to do the same. But I'm thinking you're hinting somewhere else. Is that the case?
I was hinting at Azure B2C, yes. So Azure B2C gives me exactly this capability where I want to be able to expose services, I want to be able to authenticate users, but I don't want to have to manage the logins, I don't want to have to manage resetting passwords, I don't want to have to manage those users within the same directory. Or maybe I don't have a directory at all, but I want a place where people can sign up, they can either create an account, or maybe I want them to log in via Facebook or Google or Twitter or something like that, use some sort of OAuth identity provider. But again, I don't want to have to build all of that plumbing. And so that's where Azure B2C comes in, where I can leverage this identity as a service that I get with Azure Active Directory and still have authentication and security and all of the good stuff that I get out of this service and out of this directory without having to actually go and code it myself.
You know, I love the way you put that because it hits near and dear to our hearts. We built a Visual Cadence, this application that we built together at Northwest Cadence, and we needed people to sign in, and yet not everyone had an Azure Active Directory at the time. So we struggled. We wanted them to just sign up and connect with Azure Active Directory. Today, that would be a lot more easy. It's simpler today to do that because more people have it. But at the time, we needed people to sign up, and we wanted them to be able to sign up with other identities and not have to have our identity. And Azure B2C, had it been available then, would have been the perfect answer for that. It would have been a great solution. So, identity as a service, you've got Azure Active Directory itself, wonderful capability. You should build against that. And then Azure B2C, another set of capabilities, well-integrated capabilities, that allows you to pass off the authentication to other authentication providers like Facebook and Google and those sorts of things as well. So that's identity. So go ahead, get your Azure Active Directory on and start using it.